Advocates and community development groups have been asking candidates for mayor to make it known where they stand on affordable housing. That means positions on housing supply, support for first-time homebuyers, construction jobs for local residents, and support for programs hurt by spending cuts in Washington. Our guest is from one of the organizations taking part in the candidate survey. We'd like to welcome the executive director of the Boston Local Initiative Support Corporation, or Boston LISC, Bob Van Meter. Thank you very much for being with us, Bob.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
This is a survey, I guess, at first glance, you got pretty much across-the-board support for these things from candidates.
Yes, we did. I think it's striking how much unanimity there was among the 8 candidates that responded to the survey. There was strong support for building and preserving affordable housing. There was support for exploring new mechanisms to create resources to do that. And there was, like inclusionary zoning, like increasing inclusionary zoning percentages. There was also strong support from most of the candidates for the Community Preservation Act. And there was support for a number of the other specific issues. I think one of the interesting things in this campaign is that although the candidates agree, I think by and large the media coverage of the campaign has focused on education issues, and housing issues have not been front and center in most of the reporting on the campaign. And there was a candidate forum organized by another group of housing organizations about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and again, I think eight or so candidates showed up, and they all spoke to how often they're hearing on the campaign trail from people who are concerned about rising rents, people who are concerned about potential threats to their housing situation in their neighborhoods, and that came through in the responses at that event.
This is the hearing, the forum in Chinatown.
Yes, it was at the Quincy School.
A lot of people there talking about hurting from the housing market. Explain exclusionary zoning.
Inclusionary zoning?
Yeah. Yes, inclusionary, exactly.
So inclusionary zoning, the Mayor Menino adopted an executive order several years ago. I don't remember the year, but I think it's been at least 10 years, that required new market rate developments above a certain number of units to provide affordable housing as part of that market rate development. That's called inclusionary zoning, and that this policy is it's common around the country. It's common in some other communities in Massachusetts, and it has generated both housing included in larger market rate developments, and occasionally a developer will say to the Boston Redevelopment Authority, it would be more advantageous for me to essentially pay a cash fee instead of including the units in the development that they're building. And both solutions work as long as we ensure that housing is created in all neighborhoods. So we don't want to see all the developers of market rate housing in downtown Boston say, I don't want any low-income people living in my development, I'm just going to cash out the fee and you guys go build the housing somewhere else. We don't want that. But in some cases, it may be more advantageous for the community and for the city for the developer to pay that cash fee, as long as the cash fee is at a level that will create a new unit. So that's inclusionary zoning. The mayor adopted this policy with an executive order. I think housing advocates are interested in seeing it become an ordinance so that it has more durability and permanence.
And of course, where you get into more differences among candidates is whether they want to let developers put the affordable units off-site, or maybe just even how much to get from them as far as affordability.
Right. I don't think our questionnaire elicited very sharp differences, although obviously folks can go to the website and look at all the responses. There certainly are subtle differences of emphasis among the candidates, but all of them seemingly were supportive of inclusionary zoning, and most of them indicated some level of support for trying to increase those resources. The other related policy that's often confused with inclusionary zoning is linkage. Linkage is a fee that the city collects from developers of commercial space or institutional space. Inclusionary zoning is market rate housing, linkage is office and commercial space.
Another possible source of funding for new affordable units is the Community Preservation Act, and what stands between that possibility and actually putting it to work?
A citywide referendum on that policy. So 12 years ago in the 2001 election, advocates, myself included, pushed for Boston to adopt the Community Preservation Act. There was opposition from some in the real estate community, and the mayor, I believe, did not take a position, at least not through most of the campaign. I think there was a sense of uncertainty in that November 2001 election, coming only 2 months after 9/11, and we were not successful in getting the CPA adopted in 2001. Since then, dozens of communities around the state have adopted CPA. The CPA is a small transaction fee that, a small additional tax that goes on property taxes. It's not large, and we can set it at whatever, at 1%, 2%, 3% level, and depending on what folks decide is the most advantageous. And the other benefit to the CPA is that if Boston begins to collect a CPA, a Community Preservation Act, essentially a slight surcharge on property taxes, then it would be matched by state resources. So the state has a fund that it collects from real estate transaction fees and matches local community CPA. So that could provide, many $1 million of additional resources to support not only affordable housing, but open space and historic preservation. The way the Community Preservation Act legislation that was adopted in Massachusetts about 13 years ago reads is a certain percentage has to go to each of those purposes, at least 10% has to go to each affordable housing, open space, and historic preservation, but beyond that, the community can decide how it wants to spend.
Another thing you ask candidates about is what America can do to get more out of lenders for people in Boston, especially first-time home buyers.
That's right. There is a new first-time homebuyer mortgage program that the city is promoting, and it's called, I believe, One Mortgage. And I think there's been a dearth of affordable homeownership, focus on affordable homeownership since the Great Recession hit 5 years ago, in part because there's been foreclosure activity, there's been, I guess, a drawing back from homeownership. There have been many people out of work and with credit problems, but the economy is recovering, real estate prices are recovering, rental housing rates have gone up, so homeownership seems more attractive now, and I think the city and the state are beginning to create new affordable homeownership opportunities. And we'd like to see, as much as possible, opportunities for low and moderate income Bostonians to buy homes in their neighborhoods. And I think all the candidates obviously are supportive of that, and of trying to also use the leverage that the city has as a financial entity, as a business itself, to encourage responsible actions on the part of banks. So one of the ways to do that might be an ordinance that says, okay, the city rates the banks in terms of their performance on homeownership and other kinds of community reinvestment activities, and says we're gonna use that ranking in order to decide how we make deposits or do our business with banks.
Something that Felix Arroyo's been working on.
Yes, Felix Arroyo certainly promoted that in his response. I think all the candidates are looking for increasing the accountability of banks.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Okay, thanks.
From Boston LISC, that was Bob Van Meter.